So welcome everyone. Again, my name is Dynako. I'm Director of Programming for ShiftCo. Happy to be hosting this event with Abby Stason, another peek into conscious leadership. So without any further ado, Abby, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Let me hit this. Got it. Great. So yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Abby Stason. I'm here in North Carolina. Just spent 16 years in Silicon Valley, originally from New Jersey. Very passionate about conscious leadership. Spent 20 years on Wall Street. And just realized people were really seeking a different way to exist in the world and to be together in the workforce, particularly. And that's my focus. Stephen, if you want to go to the next slide here. Yeah, so we're facing some real challenges. Here we are in 2020, 2021, pandemic, information, that we're well into an information age. So technology is advancing faster than we are. And the blind spot of our time really is, how can we collaborate in a way that we can get things done? And relating is the #1 skill we need in this day and age. Go ahead and do the next slide. Yeah, if you think of it this way, think back into it. Like, why is this important? Well, back in the 1800s, people spent all day milking cows, farming for their survival, right? Actually milking cows, growing their food. Let's go to the next slide. And then what happened is that they would spend all day creating widgets, right? As the Industrial Revolution came around, people would spend all day creating widgets. And let's go to the next slide. And even back then, you see these long line of desks. People were recording and bookkeeping individually. So I came from Wall Street and I just think about, oh my God, all the bookkeeping that had to happen by hand back then. If a person bought a stock, the books and records would have to change. Someone would actually have to write that in a book. So in all of these 3 pictures you've just seen, these slides, notice how each person is isolated in doing their work, right? So they're focused on their task. Well, that's not how things are today. Go ahead, Stephen, go to the next slide. So knowledge and our ability to collaborate is the #1 skill now. It's the essential commodity of an information age. The way we work now is to share information, to share wisdom, to collaborate together, to take a product to market, to actually talk, speak, relate all day long as we build products. And technology is advancing very fast, but we haven't advanced with it. So this new leadership model is emerging to be a conscious leader. Because think about it, if I have to collaborate with others, I have to have more awareness in how I behave and how I show up, as opposed to when I'm creating widgets or frankly, milking a cow or knitting a sweater all day. Mm-hmm. So that's why this is so important right now. So let's go to the next slide, Stephen. And in that, since technology has advanced so much, I mean, it's good for us. And now that we have control of the planet and are destroying it with our control, and now that technology is advancing faster than we are, and for us on this webinar, food, clothing, and shelter are not an issue for us. So most of us are privileged. So there's room for something else now. And there's a sense of urgency and relevance to how we show up. And that is conscious leadership. Let's go to the next slide. So in the last, you can all go back and watch the first webinar, but on that one, I spoke to the #1 myth of conscious leadership is to get rid of the ego. Well, we don't want to get rid of the ego. We want to develop it. Well, the #2 myth of conscious leadership is that there's something to do, that there's something we have to transform. That's actually not true. Consciousness is our preferred state. It's our presence is our state, our natural state. What happens is that we get in our way. So there's actually nothing to do. There's nothing to transform. It's just we have to get out of the way, and that is to get our ego out of the way by developing it. And when we do get in the way, go to the next slide, Stephen. Here's some examples of what happens in unconscious leadership. So Billy McFarland, if you haven't seen the documentaries about the Fire Festival, I highly recommend you watch them. They're extremely informative. Billy created this festival and basically lied through the whole thing. It was unconscious. He tried to create this festival and it just fell flat. They weren't ready for it, and the participants were extremely disappointed. There's a Netflix documentary. There's another documentary out. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you see it. It's an excellent case study on unconscious leadership. The next one is Travis Kalanick. If you haven't read the book about Uber called Super Pump, I highly recommend that. So Uber was a fast-growing company. You've heard of Uber. And it was extremely toxic, all the way from leadership to the drivers, to the corruption, to murders. I mean, you can't write this stuff. It's like a movie. And then finally, Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. She's on trial now. So we're seeing the impact of unconscious leadership in a really big way. And there is another option. The other option is to be conscious. And you can tell I get excited about this because the difference between a conscious leader and unconscious leader is dramatic. So let's go to the next slide. Well, what does a conscious leader look like? What does it mean to be a conscious leader? Well, I'm awake to myself. I'm aware of myself. I'm aware of my actions and how they impact the environment. I create conditions. Conscious leader create conditions to meet what's here. That is, to be able to gauge the situation, be present to it, and meet it, and know if they can't meet it. And that goes along the lines of not aiming for perfection. It all has to do with awareness. Conscious leaders know that we all have blind spots, and they continue to want to be uncovered. Conscious leaders make truth their primary focus, even when it's inconvenient. So if you go back to Elizabeth Holmes, it would have been extremely inconvenient for her to tell the truth along the way. Same thing with Billy McFarland and the Fire Festival. If he had told himself the truth, first of all, to himself and then to others, he should have canceled that festival. Instead, it went on and it was a pure failure. Conscious leaders aren't tone deaf to what's happening around them in society and on the planet. So this is where I've seen a lot of people say, I'm mindful, I'm conscious, and yet they're tone deaf to major movements that are happening. One, the women's movement, right? Me Too movement. So this is a massive movement happening. So conscious leaders know, okay, there's a movement that's happening, a new one. Do I have to change my behavior? Do we have to change our culture? How can we meet this and join in on it? Similarly, the Black Lives Matters movement. So there's a lot of movements happening now and shifting that's happening, and conscious leaders stay awake to that so that they can pivot and be agile. And then finally, conscious leaders show remarkable congruence for what they claim to stand for and how they live and lead. So they match their inner experience with their outer expression. And in that, we typically relax around a conscious person because they are congruent. You don't have to analyze them too much. And when we're leading groups of people and leading movements and teams and our business, our clients, people can relax in knowing that, okay, I'm married to the truth and I'm congruent, and it makes for a much deeper connection. And frankly, we get things done much faster. So that's how these are just a few ways that you recognize a conscious leader. What's not on here also, I feel compelled to share and say, is a conscious leader, a conscious human being, has a commitment to learning. They know that growth and learning is endless, no matter how old, how young, whatever. It's like, okay, what's the next learning arc for me in my life and my leadership? Slide. And so what about all these terms? So there's a whole bunch of terms being thrown around: awakened, mindful, transformational. I like the word conscious, intentional, enlightened. You can go to the next slide, Stephen. All these words, whatever your flavor is, stick with it. I don't have to get into semantics. The whole point of it, though, is to embody, right? There's a lot of talk about being conscious and mindful, transformational and enlightened. But what does that actually mean? So that means we have to embody the term itself, and that's through a set of skills. Instead of, we can move from buzzwords into real embodiment. Let's go to the next slide. So for instance, we can embody conscious leadership, I say, through a series of skills. Becoming a conscious human being is a skill. It's a series of practices. I'm not going to go over all of these, but these are just one page. We're going to have another page here. Just hold off 1 second, Stephen. But at the core of it, the practice of presence is at the core of a conscious leader. The conscious leader knows that mastery of presence is of the utmost importance, along with emotional intelligence, consciously committing, speaking, listening, being congruent, like I mentioned. And Stephen, you can go to the next slide. Knowing the style preferences, my conditioning. For instance, I'm a huge introvert, got such a strong preference for introversion that if the scale went to infinity, that would not be far enough for me, right? So as a conscious leader, I'm aware of that, and then I can act accordingly, making conscious agreements, being in positive energy. And I also want to point out here, cultivating self-esteem. So there's this new buzzword about imposter syndrome going on in the world today. Really, at the heart of imposter syndrome is, what is my relationship to myself? What is my self-esteem level? And cultivating healthy self-esteem is a skill. It's another practice. And conscious leaders have strength of mind to know when they're not in their mind chatter, or to know when they are and aren't. And they also know their biology. In this day and age, we have to understand our biology and how we get triggered and what happens in our neurosystem, our brains, our neuroscience, neurology, and our biology. You can go to the next slide. So really, conscious leadership is this intersection between constant awareness, constant learning, and then bigger impact. And again, conscious leaders must have a commitment to growth and learning. So those skills I all just mentioned, you can focus on over time. And I'd like to give people a little bit of a taste of skills through these webinars and speaking engagements that I do of any kind, just to give you a little bit of a taste of it and a more direct peek. So let's go into emotional intelligence, Stephen. Next slide. So emotional intelligence is a core skill of conscious leaders. This is a tough one because people, I've been at workshops or speaking engagements, any of that. And the first question I ask, or even one-on-one, the first question I ask, okay, is raise your hand if you think emotional intelligence is just normal for a human being. Emotions are absolutely normal for a human being and absolutely necessary to have emotional intelligence in the workforce and leadership. So raise your hand if you think that. Usually 100%, yeah, right? Of course, most people say of course. So whether there's one person across from me, 50 or 500 or whatever, everybody says, oh, of course it is. So then the second question is, okay, raise your hand if you're comfortable feeling your emotions or being around others who are emoting. So, well, Bill, you're an exception here. So most people aren't. So this is where crowds of people usually go, you're not going to make us feel, are you? And so we start laughing. I usually do get a comment like that. And the crowd erupts in laughter because look at the paradox of that, right? We know it's absolutely necessary and normal for being a human, but everyone's afraid to emote. So the skill here is to know what you're feeling when you're feeling it and to capture the wisdom from it. So that's what emotional intelligence is. Can I actually feel my feelings? Let's go to the next slide. And the way to do that is to focus on your biology and your physiology. So your biology, your physiology, your feelings, the sensations in your body actually lead the way into emotional intelligence. Most people think it's reversed. And this is where we spend most of our days in our heads. thinking our way through life rather than actually feeling our feelings. Go to the next slide, Stephen. So really when I think of emotions, I like to break it down into 5 core emotions. There's a lot of other terms, but let's start here. Anger, joy, sadness, fear, and sexual energy. I like to keep it in these 5 because when I hear frustrated or ashamed even, or disturbed, disgusted, stressed, I find all of those terms can back into one or more of these emotions. And the skill here, the practice, is to get out of our heads, feel into our bodies what's happening, take the sensations from our body and decide which emotion that is, and then capture the wisdom from it. Because each emotion has wisdom associated with it. So I'm going to leave anger right now, but for instance, joy, something wants to be celebrated. So when we're feeling happy, we typically feel it in our chest. It's an overall good feeling. Sadness, that's actually an error right there. I got to get that slide fixed, but sadness should say something wants to be let go of. So when we're feeling sad, we usually have a heavy chest and tears might come. And so, the easiest example of that is someone dies, right? You feel heavy chested, you feel sad. We're letting go of that person. So it's very healthy to feel our sadness. Fear is a call to pay attention to something. So fear is our friend. So let's say I have a big speaking engagement. Usually public speaking is a classic example where people feel scared. Well, instead of going unconscious, not breathing and freezing, fighting, flighting, whichever of your flavor, we can just be present to it again and say, okay, I'm about to give this big speech. What do I want to pay attention to? I'm feeling scared. And that's where our to-do list can come from. And then sexual energy is a call to create or innovate. So when we're feeling sexual energy, we can do something with that when we go home at night, if we choose. But in the workforce and in the day-to-day, that's creative energy. So whenever a client says to me, I feel frustrated or I'm bored, the first question I ask them is, have you been innovating? Have you been creating? Are you using your creative juices at all? And the answer is always no. And when teams get stagnant, this is the other thing. If teams get stagnant and aren't creating as much or brainstorming or innovating, they can get feeling frustrated. It's just this energy that wants to create. Now let's go back to anger. We can go to the next slide. So anger is a tough one. Anger is neither good nor bad. It's just like fire. The problem is there's so much bad press, if you will, or baggage around anger. Anger is just another emotion, another way that our body signals to us that something wants to happen. Now here we are, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. I know the vaccines are helping and the cases are dropping. We're actually starting to see a little bit of good news that things are leveling off. But I've asked my clients or people, when was the last time you felt angry? The response is, oh, I don't get angry. So you're telling me that we've been in the middle of a pandemic and you haven't been pissed off at all? So they kind of reflect on that and they're like, okay, I get it. I mean, some people just really think that anger is bad. And it can be, because here's what's bad is if we aren't in harmony with our anger, aren't present to our anger, then we can be harmful. And that's what's bad, right? We cause harm in others. Now, we're seeing that on social media. People are very, very angry and screaming and yelling at each other on social media. Oh, here's another example. You've all probably heard this. Incidences of road rage have gone up astronomically. So what is that? That's pent up anger, right? People are angry that they haven't been out. So they take it out on others. So this is a really tough emotion. I find people really struggle with it. It's time to just say anger is our friend, because anger has messages that come with it. And let's go to the next slide. So when you're feeling angry, I love this. Speaking of yelling, this guy's yelling on the slide. So speaking of anger, and so we usually feel anger in our head, neck, and jaw, okay, and our shoulders. Some people's faces may get red. For me, my jaw gets very tight. So I can start to, when I'm feeling angry, right here, my jaw gets tight. And if I keep it up, I start to do this a little bit with my shoulders, and my shoulders get tight. So that's the first step. Okay, am I feeling tightness in my face? Is my face red? So some people's faces turn very red when they're angry. You know, an anger face is not this, you know, an open, you know, an anger face is usually this. I like this slide because this gentleman seems angry, right? So these are the signs of anger. So when you're feeling angry, you can ask, okay, what wants to be fully met? Is there something here that wants to be met? So here's an example of that. Oh, let's go through these. So the three pieces of wisdom that you can ask yourself is what wants to be fully met? What needs to be destroyed or replaced? And finally, what do I disagree with or have a no for? That is, I don't want it to happen. So what wants to be fully met? Here's an example. I talked about public speaking a little while ago. So if I give a speech, even though I prepped, and I don't show up in alignment with my abilities, my expertise, and my ability to do the speech, I may feel angry because I didn't meet myself. And that has happened to me. I've given a speech and it didn't go as well. It's not about perfection, but it didn't match my skills. So we may not be meeting ourselves. So that's where we may feel angry because we haven't met ourselves. Here's another typical one that I hear quite often. Let's say we have a team meeting every Tuesday at 2, and Abby shows up every week between 2:07 and 2:12. So 7 to 12 minutes late. The other people in the room aren't going to feel met because they showed up at 2 o'clock. And so instead of speaking up about that and asking, hey, Abby, would you be willing to show up on time, or what's going on for you? I notice you're late every week. Instead, we think in our heads, there she goes. She's always late. She doesn't, you know, the stories just go like, she's not a good member of the team. She doesn't care about our time. You know, the agenda's late again. That's where a lot of drama starts. So anger's a time to ask for something or to meet something. Anger is also a sign that maybe something wants to be destroyed or replaced. We don't really embrace destruction in our world. Instead, we wait until it blows up and becomes a huge nightmare. But when we're feeling angry, it could be okay, like maybe this project doesn't want to happen. I've noticed I'm feeling angry. You know, this actually doesn't want to happen. And I'm overriding that. This actually wants to be destroyed. This project does not want to happen. This personal date doesn't want to happen. I mean, it can be everything from personal to professional. But we typically think we have to keep going rather than, okay, do we need to do this at all? Maybe this wants to be destroyed. And then finally, at the core of it, anger equals no. So when you're feeling angry, it's simply, what do I have a no for here? An NO for? What do I disagree with? Because at its core, anger helps and instills boundaries in us. So you've heard of the terrible twos, right? No, 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 no. So children, young children are starting to because if someone treats me poorly, that's my boundary. When I was on Wall Street, there was a gentleman, he was old enough to be my father. I was 29 years old. And we were in an office area and he was angry that the copy machine wasn't working. So he was pounding it. And then he took a clipboard and whipped it across the room. Now he could have hit this person sitting down and it came at me and I just ducked and it wasn't really close, but I did one of these moves. So instead of calling him names or judging him, I was really angry and so were the other people in the room. And I said, stop, you are not going to continue this. I want you to walk to your office. I'm going to follow you. We're going to clean out your desk and you're going to be fired. And like, it was just that quick. I didn't judge him. I didn't say it was good or bad, but he could have really caused some danger. So we did just that. But instead, what we do is we go into defensive mode or we attack back. A classic move would have been to throw something back at him. At the core of this too, it can be really simple as having a meeting before lunch and starting to feel angry because we're losing our glucose, the glucose in our brains, because right before lunch, our brain energy drops. We can start to feel angry because we're hungry and we have to continue a meeting or something and we don't want to. It can also be, we can also feel angry because we've decided to go out with that other couple when we don't really resonate with them. But we don't really come in harmony with our anger. Anger is just another message and a really strong one. And let's go to the next slide. And here's where it gets really, really tough. And we're seeing this. So at the core of it, anger means, okay, I disagree with this or I have a no for what's happening. However, there are times when we can't change our circumstances or the circumstances around us aren't going to change. Now, I'm sure all of us would wish that the pandemic didn't exist. Okay, so I have a no for a global pandemic. I disagree with the pandemic. Okay, the virus could give two hoots about what I think. So my life has to change. Our lives have to change. So everyone's could feel angry because, okay, I have to change my lifestyle and I don't want this to happen. I want things to be different. And that's where we suffer. And it gets really hard because we have this low hum of anger all the time because the circumstances can't change. Now that's a global pandemic. Let's bring it a little bit more down to earth here. You know, you're in a company, for instance, and here's a situation. I have executives at a tech company. Well, they were bought by a bigger company. So these executives don't want to be owned by this other company. And the culture is starting to change. So they have a no for the culture changes, but they can't change what's happening. And that's where it gets tough because if we're constantly angry, then we get short with each other, right? Even though it has absolutely nothing to do with you. We take it out on each other or it comes out disproportionately. So the question and the skill comes in that it takes is to ask, how can I take care of myself while this is happening? Literally, how can I move my anger energy? Now let's throw the pandemic back in. We're all just sitting, right? Because we're all on Zoom. So now we're sitting and stewing in our anger. I don't want to be sitting. I don't want the pandemic. I don't want this reorg to happen. Here's another one. I don't want this new manager that was just assigned to me, client I was just talking to the other day. So the skill is, okay, how can I take that anger energy and move it? Well, the answer to that one is to move. I recommend you move around, like literally get up and move around. Number two, like anger is resistance energy. So lifting weights and things like that, literally pushing up against a wall. I mean, this is becoming so mainstream I'm a big Billions. I don't know if anyone watches Billions, but I'm a big Billions fan. Shout out. This is going to be recorded. So shout out to the Billions writers. But I'm a big fan of Billions. Came from Wall Street and really enjoy it. But at one point, one of the characters, Taylor, went to a rage room. So there are actually rage rooms that exist now where they put you in safety gear and you take a sledgehammer or whatever large object and you go around and you destroy things. That's conscious movement of anger energy. Because now imagine being an unconscious leader, not in alignment with your anger energy, and then taking it out on your organization. Or you're angry and you're an entrepreneur and you get on the phone with a client. If you're not moving that anger will come out sideways. And even I'll share a personal experience too. Stephen knows this, and so does Terry. My mom has been ill, and we just moved her. She's doing really well, but one of the reasons I moved east is to be closer to her. And we just moved her to New Jersey, and she's doing really well. But while we were in her house, her friends all said, well, look on the bright side, you get to be closer to family, which is true, very true. But I said to her, Mom, it's okay to be angry. I'm sure you're happy you're going to be closer to my brothers and nieces, grandkids and all that. But I said, Mom, it's okay to be angry. You've been in this house for 20 years. You know, it's okay to feel angry that it's time for you to move. You may not want to right now, but you realize that's what you have to do. So it's okay to be pissed. And she's like, yeah, you know, you're right. So then we were in the kitchen and I said something to her and she said, well, I don't effing care. And I said, Mom, did you just drop an F-bomb? And she said, I did. So what? And she went into her room. So we laugh, you know, so we're able to hold it lightly. And then another time she was feeling angry. I'm like, Mom, wouldn't it be fun to get a whole bunch of dishes right now and throw them against the wall? And she's like, yeah, that would be fun. And she's like, we're not going to do that, are we? I said, no, we don't need to. But see, my point is that everyone's like, don't feel angry. Don't feel angry. Angry's bad. Anger's bad. It's simply like, okay, it's just different energy. It's a boundary. And how can I meet it? And a final example, and this is in a blog I wrote, if you don't move it, it'll come out somehow, and it usually comes out disproportionately. And this is an opportunity to be more conscious. I was swimming at a pool while I was in California, and this gentleman was walking in a swim lane. So there's walk lanes and swim lanes. This gentleman was walking in a swim lane. So a young woman just said, would you mind moving over to the walking lane? Because there's very designated lanes, slow, fast, slow, medium, fast, and walk lanes. He just screamed at her. She made a simple request and he just blew up at her, like, let her have it. So then this lifeguard came down, who's like all of 17 years old, and like asked him to move again, and he screams at him again. So finally, they had to ask him to leave the pool, and while he was leaving the pool, he was screaming. That had absolutely nothing to do with the woman who asked him, the lifeguard. That is all just a bunch of pent up emotion. And that's what's happened. So the opportunity for us is to embrace anger and move it more consciously. And finally, if you're feeling angry, it's a call to make a request. Would you be willing to? Would you lower your voice? I'm not available for you to speak to me that way. Instead, we go into blaming and shaming. So enough about anger. I just feel compelled to speak of this. Let's go to the next slide. Because I find 100% of people that I coach and teams, you know, everyone's feeling all this anger because there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot that we see on social media. We're seeing, you know, every day we're hearing about gun violence. Well, I don't know about you, but I have a no for all of that. And, you know, and feel angry. So it's a way for me to come into harmony by simply noticing when I feel angry and how can I move my energy in a more conscious way. And then in turn, when I do that, I'm able to speak about my anger in a way that's very conscious and frankly, more leader-like and inspiring. So that's your first taste of a skill of conscious leaders, is emotional intelligence and specifically anger. And conscious leaders know that emotions just are natural, and we can be present with them, capture the wisdom, and move on. And let's go to the next slide. And why is emotional intelligence so important? Well, research studies prove there's a direct link between emotions and health. So when we suppress our emotions, and anger is a really tough one, we affect our immune system. Now, if I'm leading or if I'm an entrepreneur, I want to be healthy. I want to have vitality. Also, emotional ventilation is a non-negotiable for resilience. So the studies and science are clear here that if you can't emote in a present way, your resilience will suffer. Your ability to get through tough circumstances will take a hit. And our insight follows experience. So emotions invite deeper intelligence and wisdom. So if someone's feeling angry around me, I say, well, okay, do you feel angry? Yeah, is usually the response. I go, what do you have a no with? Are you disagreeing with something? What should we be doing differently? And then they can share, because they have the deeper intelligence and wisdom that I just invited them into. You might also hear, well, I'm angry the dog pooped on the carpet this morning and I'm late, so it can also be something like that, right? But we don't even come into harmony with that. And I say, just be an exceptional human being and leader. If I want to be conscious, I want to be an exceptional human being and leader, and that's why I'm committed to consciousness. Let's go on, next slide. And I'll reiterate this too. When we're conscious, we have more energy and vitality because conscious leaders know to be present and know to have emotional intelligence and feel their emotions. They know to breathe and keep their life force energy intact. And that in turn gives us more energy and vitality. We actually have more energy that we have access to. And we also know when we aren't present, which in turn then doesn't have us suffering and fighting the moment. So, and I don't know about you, but I love to have more energy and vitality. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I can handle everything that comes, but at least I can meet that with vitality and understand when I can't and when I need to rest. And we'll go to the next slide then with that segue. Another core skill of conscious leaders is the process of commitment. So when I say that, I mean that we don't get what we're committed to. We don't get what we want, we get what we're committed to. And then the absence of conscious commitments, our unconscious patterns will rule the day. Let's go to the next slide. So the first commitment that conscious leaders know and have is to ongoing learning. But let's take it down a notch to self-care. So if I say I'm committed to self-care, but I don't have vitality and I let myself get run down, then I'm committed to being run down. So the result shows. Let's use another one that's easy to understand is weight loss, right? This is a big one for most people, is that if I say I'm committed to weight loss, but I continue to eat pizza and hamburgers, well, I'm not losing weight. So what am I committed to? Being unhealthy. So the process of commitment is another core skill and practice of conscious leaders, because we don't get what we want, we get what we're committed to. And I mentioned in an earlier slide that self-esteem is really important in this day, in every age. Let me say that. How I relate to myself and how I treat myself matters, because I can't lead, I can't be an entrepreneur, I can't be a good spouse, you name it, friend. I can't be in a relationship in a healthy way unless I have a healthy relationship with myself. So conscious leaders also have a commitment to healthy self-esteem. So here it's something that you can step into is to commit to relentless self-care, because in this day and age, life is very challenging. So a commitment to relentless self-care really aligns everything around my self-care and then my actions. When I step into a commitment, I'm actually then every action I align around that. So you can think of, okay, how am I doing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? And then I actually add a fifth one about financial. How am I doing financially? So I can move up and down in all four of these quadrants, if you will, to see how I'm doing in my commitment to relentless self-care, because you will be challenged on this. I think we all are. You know, we were challenged physically during the pandemic. We are always challenged mentally because our minds want to do things that and go off on their own and create this narrative and mental chatter in our heads. So a commitment to mental health is really important. I just talked about emotions, the importance of emotions to self-care. And then finally, spiritual. I'm not going to, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are or anything, just that you have some spiritual practice and commit to that. And all of those add to self-care. So let's go to the next slide. So this is simply what you can do now is like, where am I on the pillars of thriving? Where do I need to ramp up or pay more attention? Because a lot of people are struggling now physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So this is an exercise you can do real quickly to say, what's my commitment around my self-care? And let's go to the next slide. At the end of the day, too, conscious leaders are really done surviving, right? We're out of survival mode. And all of the practices that come with conscious leadership get us out of survival mode so that we are a more evolved, integrated, present human being. And in that, I'm able to navigate anything and everything. And that includes to know when I can't, when I need to retreat. But I'm not doing that from a place of survival. I'm doing that from a place of conscious action. And so let's go to the next slide. Because being conscious is extremely satisfying. I'm in quality of action versus quantity of action. I mentioned self-esteem earlier. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Sorry. I mentioned, my screen went away. Apologize there. So I mentioned self-esteem earlier. When we're conscious, our self-esteem rises. So sorry about that. Our self-esteem rises when we live and lead consciously. Because when I'm in conscious action, I'm actually the author of my activities. I take responsibility. So when I take personal responsibility and we take collective responsibility, our self-concept, our self-esteem rises because of it. And it gets us out of the blame game. I'm the author of my life. And with that, then I'm responsible for what goes well and doesn't go well. And there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of personal and collective power in that. Now, think about being an entrepreneur or a leader. If I don't have healthy self-esteem and I get told no when I'm pitching, right? That, you know, we got to get to the plate a lot of times and give a lot of pitches, right? And keep going after business. And if I'm a leader in a large organization, if my self-esteem isn't strong, I'm going to be judged as a leader, and that's okay, but we can't take it personally. And also, with presence as the foundation for everything, we collaborate more easily because we're interested in the truth over anything else. And you can see where all of these skills and practices come together to make an existence that is much more satisfying. Here, let me see what that is. I don't know what's interrupting apologize for that, Stephen, if something's interrupting my slides here. But it's extremely satisfying to be conscious. And I think about my own experience. I just experienced a lot more peace, ease, and freedom. The intensity doesn't go away. So some situations and circumstances are extremely intense. But I know when I can meet it and I know when I can't. I know when I can lead a circumstance and I know when I can't. I have the humility to say, I don't know to a group of 1,000 employees, which is much more satisfying than trying to fake my way through something. And in being an entrepreneur, when I'm present to myself and conscious, I can really navigate the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and solopreneurship. And I'm congruent with myself. and the author of my activities. It's just way more satisfying. So let's stop there. I know we have 20 minutes left. I'm doing better on time this time, Stephen, and see if any questions, comments, or observations. I'd love to hear any.
Yeah, Arlene, you had your hand raised.
Where do you go for your education, your continuing learning? What sources do you utilize?
Great question. Really great question. So here's what I do, and then you can try on yourself. So first of all, I know how I learn quickly. So it's another part of being conscious, is that I know how I learn. I know how I grok information. So I'm a voracious reader. So the way I learn a lot of things is I read a lot of research. And then what I'm really good at is taking research, data, everything from neuroscience to biology. You've heard me talk about this. Take it and turn it into practices. I'm very good at applying it in the day-to-day. I do also have a goal for myself each year about what I want to learn, okay, in terms of my own development. So that's another thing that conscious people do and humans do, is to say, okay, where am I in my development? What's my learning journey? And what do I need to learn next? First as a human, but then secondarily as a business. I also have a teacher that I sit with for the last 10 years. So that's the bulk of where I have support, with her and that community. I also surround myself with people in my inner circle who have commitments to being conscious. So that also supports me in my learning. And then I also do, from a very practical, tactical aspect, I look at my resume and some other things and see, where is it short? What do I need help with? And I'll tell you, every other year I do something on public speaking. I kind of skipped that because of the pandemic, but I'm looking at some teachings about how to be online. So let me stop and see if I answered your question and if I can be of more service there.
Yeah, you did. You gave me the idea of setting a goal, a learning goal for any time period. I really, really like that. And I'm wondering, do you do more informal things? Like, do you look for opportunities that might not be so structured? Like, I can see myself going and doing a volunteer project and really gaining a lot from that as far as emotional intelligence and things like that. And just, basically spreading the light. So, yeah, and then another side of that is, do you, you mentioned the public speaking, but do you take like formal courses? And if so, from where?
Yeah, so I do. I've taken, every other year, I try to do some public speaking training. So it's formal. It's everything. It's been everything from a weekend with, I can't remember his name. Anyway, this really famous speaker, to classes in San Francisco. I've taken improv class. I took a whole bunch of improv classes. If you can ever do that, I highly recommend it, because that's a way to get present beyond belief. It's really fun too.
That is so fun.
Yeah, so I highly recommend improv. The latest thing I'm looking for is some real speaking training about this, being online and media training. I had some at Merrill Lynch, but that was years ago, on media training. So with this new Zoom environment that we're constantly in, and speaking engagements and lighting, you can see I have a light, and I'm playing with my lighting. I always look. So here's another suggestion. I align around my commitment list. I have a list of commitments. You can go to my website. It's abigailstason.com. In my About Abby page are my list of commitments. My activities align around all of that. Now, every year I have a commitment to growth and learning. So I have goals each year that are relevant to where I am in my development, to what I have to learn next, where my resume could use some, where my experience level could increase based on the market, to everything like I'm learning how to play guitar. Now that is more of a 3-year goal, and if you heard me, you'd see why, but that's another goal I have. Think about too, an overarching mission statement. So my mission statement is to be an exceptional partner to the human race and planet and to facilitate global awakening. So every activity aligns around that. That doesn't mean that I have to be the global speaker. I can do that at the checkout line at Whole Foods. I can do that while I'm out to lunch with someone, right? So all of my activities align around that. So I'll stop there and see if I felt long-winded. I don't feel like I quite answered your question.
No, it gave me some great ideas. I really like that. And I did try improv, and it is amazing. And it's truly, because you have to be so present and really listen and be a partner in that back and forth game. And one of the things I liked about improv is you're always say yes. Like whatever your partner feeds you, you take it and run with it. And you have to be remarkably present. And you can't be sitting in your head going, oh, I'm going to go here next, because you have no idea what the other person is going to feed you. And I'm remember how nimble you had to be on your toes all the time. And it was great practice.
I appreciate that. Yes, and to that. Yes, and is what she's talking about. It teaches you, because that's life. Life is throwing things at you. We have a plan. It's good to plan. And we think about, I'm going to run my business this way, and this is where it wants to go. And next thing you know, life throws us a third curveball. And we just got a big one in terms of the pandemic. So then, okay, improvisation. Can I be present to that? Can I feel my emotions about that? And then can I respond with ability without reacting?
I want to share you one of my tools that I discovered about being present is I don't have any pets right now, but I love going to dog parks and just playing with the doggies. And I really noticed how their interactions, when there's a dust up between dogs, it's like over really quickly, and they get over it so fast. They express their feelings in the moment and they get over it, and there's no hard feelings. And I find that, if humans would just be more like animals, I mean, they're so present. They don't worry that they didn't get their treat after dinner last night. They're not worried about the next meal until they're hungry. They're remarkably present. And I think that we can use animals. I'm a big fan of just studying what's around you. So
appreciate that. Yeah, excellent. Because animals' nervous systems are different. Ours are much more complex. So that's why zebras don't get ulcers. So that's in my white paper. You can download my white paper on mastering the human condition. So yeah, we have a couple minutes here. I want to give Stephen time to talk about ShiftCo. And here's what I'll say about ShiftCo is I'm a part of ShiftCo because surround yourself with people who are committed to being conscious. It's a journey, and we can screw it up and be sloppy along the way. But I'm like, surround yourself with people who want to be conscious with you. And that's what ShiftCo is. So I'll thank you for everyone. And I'll turn it back over to Stephen here to close it out. Can't hear you. Put your yeah.
Well, there we go.
There you go.
So thanks, Abby. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for your contribution. This is Abby's information. She's mentioned it before, but that's her website, her book, and she is a master teacher on ShiftCo. So if you're a member, I invite you to look up Abby's course. And if you're considering membership in ShiftCo, let me just go through a couple of quick things about the platform. One, ShiftCo members grow their businesses. I mean, we've proven that. So if you're considering membership, we will do everything in our power to be a partner with you to help your business grow, because our members do realize business growth. You receive support from an amazing community of leaders, including Abby, who I said is a master teacher on our platform. And then we also strongly believe that collectively, we make a bigger impact, that we're stronger together, and we've got a really strong community of members. So even though many of the members in ShiftCo are what they would call solopreneurs, we do collaborate and support one another in our business growth. This is the growth platform, and there are 6 different phases that our members might fall into based on where their business is at. The bottom line here is that we help you grow to where you want to be. So we fully realize that not every entrepreneur who comes in at launch is looking to build a $10 million business. So we customize the experience for each member to help you grow to exactly where you want to be. So it's not a cookie cutter approach by any means. And then what you get as a member are these benefits. One, you get a mentor who's really your first point of contact in the platform and your guide. They will recommend courses that you could take on our platform, Abby's included. And then we have what we call pathway coaching that helps our members navigate the pathway from one phase to another. And then at the highest level, we have phase coaching, and the phase coach is the business growth expert that continues to support the rest of these benefits. Our learning management system is called the Core. We've got 3 main pillars in the Core: business fuel, leadership fuel, and personal fuel. And each of these pillars get equal weight because it's just as you learned from Abby, that we don't regard growing yourself as a business professional or as a business expert to be the only thing that's going to guarantee your success. It's also essential to build your leadership skills as well as support your inner growth. So we are committed to all 3 of those pillars in our online learning. And then you also, as a member, have the opportunity to use our platform, our backend, Shift Connect, which is how you access the online learning, as well as get involved and connect with our community of members. And then these are the membership levels. It's monthly. There are no long-term commitments. You go and you grow from month to month, and we support you through the framework as best we're able. And with that, let me just conclude by saying it's time to grow. If you're an entrepreneur who is seeking to grow your conscious business, that's what we're here for. So please join us. We would love to have you with us, and not only to help support you, but so that you can contribute to support the membership at large. So thanks very much, everyone. Until next time, enjoy being a